Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Trend Detection podcast. We're here in Southampton today, my colleagues Rob and Jonathan, and today we're talking about a very important topic in the context of predictive maintenance, which is about knowledge sharing and knowledge capture, which we know, talking to customers every day, what a big issue this is. But I guess before we get started, Jonathan and Rob both been on the podcast many times, but if you could just introduce yourselves and your role at Siemens first of all, that'd be really cool.
Yeah, hi, I'm Rob Russell. I'm the head of predictive maintenance strategy and lead our delivery team within our team at Senseye.
And I'm Jonathan Bonner, head of solution engineering.
Excellent, short and sharp, that's what I like, guys. We can go straight into it. So, let's start with the really open question about how does knowledge sharing enhance the success of predictive maintenance from your, both your experience working with customers. So maybe we'll start with Rob first of all.
Yeah, what's really key is thinking of the larger, wider aspects of maintenance in general, right? And understanding what it is you want to achieve and the business outcomes that you're looking for. But that knowledge sharing aspect, it's like knowing, what's the best way to resolve issues, obviously, when you get notifications, but also what's the best way to start projects. So we look at this from the perspective of the information we provide right during our sales process that Jonathan covers through delivery, and then the ongoing customer success management with customers. And the knowledge sharing aspect, it's useful that the tool captures that knowledge. And when we're going through that cultural change, it's understanding and showing customers how they can leverage that. They can go back through, see what maintenance was done in the past to correct an issue and build up upon that. Yeah.
But I would say even in the entire manufacturing and production space, knowledge sharing is a big problem, or at least from what I've encountered. Because if you look at global operations and global organizations, you may have identical manufacturing production lines in South America, South Africa, all the way through to Australia and New Zealand. But these individual sites aren't talking to each other. So they're not benefiting from the shared knowledge. They're not benefiting from individual learnings. They're both, or all of them, are going at it on their own, essentially. Whereas if they did have a mechanism to share this knowledge, share best practice, share lessons learned, they would be up and running a lot quicker than they are at the moment.
Yeah, so what you're saying is often individual plants work separately, so they might have their own systems in place, their different types of equipment and that kind of thing, and that causes issues, I guess, right? Trying to have common knowledge across the business.
Yeah, absolutely. So they all have their own ways of doing things, their own lessons learned, their own outcomes at the end of it, whereas it could have been a much smoother process if they had all shared what they were doing and not been in competition, essentially. But that goes all the way through to maintenance practices. So once you have, let's call it 3 identical types of production, you have 3 different approaches to maintaining it. Some will be mostly reactive for many reasons. Some will be quite a bit planned with reactive, and some will try to be in the proactive space. But if they were sharing lessons and best practice, they would all have a much more mature maintenance strategy.
Yeah, so what you might say is that, depending on the site, there's different levels of maturity in terms of readiness for predictive maintenance and the culture change that's required for it.
Yeah. It's not necessarily just the readiness, it's exploiting it as well. So some of the things that I've seen is people conducting sort of benchmarking, so like maintenance benchmark reviews. It's like you're seeing sites that have got higher productivity ratings or maybe better quality statistics. You might have other sites or the executive team saying, actually, we need to understand why is this site doing much better than others, other things that can be learned and shared across. And then the sort of experience that we've had with the Senseye product, and the fact it's a cloud-based solution and you use it at the sort of a multinational level. So if we've got organisations that have their factories in different geographic locations, they're using one instance in the cloud. So at least they've got access to the common data sets, and then they can use that to build conversations in and around.
Yeah, a centralised visibility, essentially. So learning from the one platform, but also then the ability to communicate with each other through that one platform.
Exactly.
Yeah, so we've talked about sort of collaboration, knowledge sharing across different sites as well, but it's also across sort of departments as well. So we've got sort of maintenance, operations, IT teams. How does it work on that sort of level? Maybe Rob, if you...
Yeah, so you got if you think about how factories work, right? Primarily, it's not about maintenance, right? It's about operations, it's about production, it's about getting the throughput in that factory. So what you can do through having, you know, this common data set and common set of knowledge, in effect, you can ease that conversation between the maintenance manager and the production manager. You know, fundamentally, if you're in a factory, the production manager is your internal customer. And if you can actually show them the evidence as to why you need access to that production line, you know, what sort of upcoming problems he's got, what risk he's carrying, you can make much more informed decisions about, are you going to carry on running that production line right through to the weekend, and you know, and get your gap where you can get in and do the maintenance, or do you actually do not want to take that risk and stop it now? So that sort of level, and then other aspects as well. You know, you've got demand for spares, quality departments, and having that sort of one common set of data and knowledge that you can pull should ease all of those conversations.
And I would say actually getting those relevant stakeholders from the different departments is a challenge. You know, it's one of the things that our department is responsible for: defining a project team, making sure we have the right people from the right departments involved from the very beginning, because of how important their knowledge and input is, even in the investigation and implementation phases. And it is a challenge to get them, but we make sure that we do have maintenance and OT and IT and production inputs, because not only do their skills and knowledge really input in those initial stages, it's the success criteria. What are we aiming for? What is it that we're trying to achieve? Their inputs on those factors are invaluable, really.
I guess, Jonathan, in those sort of early sessions, do you find that people are quite open to sharing from their perspectives, or not to pick out a certain department, but in general, some departments more protective over, you know, what they're trying? Are they openly sharing, I guess, in those sessions?
I would say that it is a skill to eke that information
Stakeholder
out.
management, right? Isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it really depends on what the information is. I don't think any company wants their IP out in the world. And really, we are not looking for any of that information, but sometimes it's about convincing them that it's not IP we're looking for, just you know, relevant, useful knowledge. But yeah, if you find a sponsor or someone who is going to be your internal sponsor, it's a lot easier to get the relevant information from them than it is, let's say, a production manager who doesn't know who you are, doesn't know why you want this information, and is probably unwilling to give that to you.
And I guess, is that the key? Because we often talk about cultural change and the importance of that. But Rob, from your perspective, is that sort of key, having that project sponsor or champion to sort of drive through that, you know, that change?
Yeah, very much. I mean, you can hear from the sort of things we're describing. This is working at various levels, right? And it's quite a complex sort of interaction of what we do with this knowledge. But you do need somebody that creates that pool and demand internally. You know, in a lot of cases, it's not really about just applying the technology and walking away. There's a lot of work that, I mean, my team do to look at change management processes. So fundamentally, what you end up having is you think you're looking for a technology, but you're actually looking for a change management service that helps you take that technology and adapt the way that you're working. And you couldn't do that without the internal support. So we look at sponsorship and sort of champions from the shop floor level through to middle management, right through to the senior executive team. And you need to pull at all of those levels, and you can't really push this thing through.
Yeah, and when I talk about adoption, personally, I give two examples. One is a PDM champion, one person who is responsible for taking the information and distributing that internally to the relevant people. Or the other approach, which is every member of the maintenance team being responsible. Either approach is fine. For us, the most important thing is the usage and adoption of this information. But it is a pull. You cannot push it on people, which is also why we try and get the key stakeholders involved in the very beginning. Because there's nothing worse for a maintenance team than having a solution thrust on them without any input from their departments or individuals. You know, here you go, this is fantastic. As management, we think you're going to benefit loads from this. And really, they just see it as an extra task. It's a push onto them, and time after time, it will be a failure. Whereas if there's a pull, if you get their involvement early on, their concerns addressed early on, and they get that pull factor, that is when you start to see adoption throughout the site.
Yeah, and I guess just thinking of that, I guess naturally you become more protectionist. You go back into your thing rather than being open about, to the knowledge sharing topic. If you feel backed into something that you're not bought into and want to do necessarily.
Yeah.
In terms of the data itself, so you mentioned different stakeholders, and I guess it's about thinking about which data is most relevant to each different stakeholders. But how, from a sort of a Senseye predictive maintenance point of view, do we make that information, both accessible and valuable to all these different stakeholders at different levels?
So I think what's become really key in what we're doing now, as far as pushing knowledge out, is utilising a lot of the work that we have with generative AI and our embedded co-pilots. For years now, the way that we've been approaching this, and the way a lot of the market have been, is trying to think of how do you solve that problem with the sensor data and the time series data and the analytics on top of that. As far as I'm concerned, that's a solved problem now, right? Knowing what to do with sensor data and to get the value from it. Where we're shifting now is that human transactional data. So this is maintenance records, it's feedback inside the system, it's notes, it's even documentation, reports, maintenance manuals, and that's where the core of the knowledge is coming from, right? It's one thing knowing that there's something wrong with the machine. The next level is, how do I fix this, and how did somebody else fix this in the past that experienced it, right? And how do you avoid unnecessarily wasting time on trouble and problem solving when you can actually see somebody else, they tried 3 things and it wasn't until the 3rd thing that they actually found the solution, but you just go straight to the 3rd thing, right? You don't need to do all that investigation yourself. You can leverage that expertise from other colleagues within your organisation.
Yeah, and it's those different layers of knowledge and feedback and human interaction that we're benefiting from. There is the expert documentation, which from my experience, there's a user manual somewhere in a cupboard in the admin building. No one's ever looked at and don't even know where the key is really. So if you do need to reference it, it's quite a pain to get to.
Yeah.
Whereas if you have that easily accessible and easily referenced, it's now becoming live in day-to-day maintenance practices. But there's also the day-to-day interaction, the conversation between 2 maintenance personnel saying, I did this didn't work, but I tried this didn't work, but the 3rd thing is the one to go for. And using that in future references and notifications.
So actually what we're talking about here is also not about sharing knowledge, but actually surfacing knowledge that, like I said, is either, in an analogue world, gathering dust in a cupboard, or it's left on the system in a deep, dark system somewhere as well. So it's actually lifting that back up and making use of it again, which, again, is fantastic.
That's right. And if you think from the perspective of more traditional maintenance practices and centralised reliability engineering teams or maintenance experts, they'd be writing these I'm trying to like technical documents and sort of how-to documents. Well, the need for that it doesn't go away entirely, it's diminished, but you can scale it, right, as well, because now you've got access to a vast pool of knowledge. You've got co-pilots and Gen AI that's going to help you get to that sort of 80-20 sort of result. You can quickly pull out the pieces you need, surface that knowledge, and then you can, maybe polish that a little bit, some reviews, just checking it, and then release it out to the wider community. These are the sort of things that we're kind of doing in the background, looking at our internal processes, and not necessarily the knowledge about how to use PDM, but how to implement and roll it out. What are the best type of data feeds from certain machine types? Well, we've got that in our Senseye knowledge base, but we are going through a process now to capture that and embed it inside delivery tools and pre-sales tools. Yeah.
And if we look at the human element a bit more, so one area is great to share knowledge, but of course there's people who've been in businesses for maybe 40 years working every day, and then they retire or leave, and that knowledge is lost. So I guess how can companies with predictive maintenance sort of overcome that sort of issue, or that problem?
Well, for example, with our industrial co-pilots within the application, that is capturing the human element, so that experienced maintenance feedback. So the experienced maintainer understands exactly what's happening because he's been working with this machine for 20, 30, 40 years. So instead of having to go through a checklist, he knows exactly what to check. And now that would typically be handed over to an apprentice or someone younger in the team, and they would learn through interaction. Whereas every time that experienced maintenance engineer is inputting feedback into the application, it's learning and storing and tying that in with your time series sensor data. So it's storing the knowledge at the right point at the right time with feedback on the data. So you know exactly what's happening with the machine, you know exactly what the feedback was the last time, you can cross-reference this and hand that information to any one of your maintenance team now.
Yeah. And I think thinking of it maybe from like a higher or wider perspective, I like to think that, you know, technologies like Sensei and the fact that it can capture that knowledge, it ends up being a substitute for these colleagues that have been on the shop floor for decades. But it actually goes broader than that, and it can be bigger, because if you're collecting that knowledge, not necessarily from those individuals in that one production line, but multiple production lines around the world, that collective knowledge that you've now got access to isn't decades, it's potentially like hundreds of years of experience, right, that you can combine. That would take, you know, maybe you'd never get to that level of expertise, or maybe not necessarily expertise, that access to the experiences that have created that knowledge, like all those various events and corrections and fixes and repairs that have taken place. No one individual will experience all those in their lifetime, but the system can have a record of it and can expose that out to people that maybe only been in the organisation for like 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, and I was just thinking of that. So, as a new starter, a new generation coming into the business, that, you know, compared to previous generations, you have to learn from the person standing next to them. They've just got the knowledge already there. They can ask questions to a system and get the answers they need, and sort of begin. You know, just, you know, when I'm thinking about onboarding of users as well, you must have benefit there.
Yeah, I've been making a joke recently that I may need to rethink, but essentially the way that I see our Copilot functionality enabling is someone from admin can now become a maintenance planner, because instead of them having to have decades worth of experience and know-how, the information is being recorded from all of the users and the relevant information being presented to them. So possible explanations, recommended actions, links to previous. So the requirements for knowledge and skills and experience, even in just taking in the information and distributing it, is now a lot less, because you're getting so much more rich information presented to you.
And I think we touched on a lot of topics, we talked in more general terms, but what I thought would be good to sort of dive into is actually, you know, a real customer example. And the customer I'm going to bring out is BlueScope Steel, which an incredibly successful customer, but one of the standout things from their point of view is actually, you know, their knowledge sharing and how they've grown their deployment. So I don't know if Rob, you wanted to, so your thoughts on their success, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I think back to when we started with them, you know, they were wanting a lot of proof points, right? They had quite high expectations, and we had to work very hard to actually show and demonstrate that capability to them. But the reason that was is that they had a higher, longer term vision. They kind of knew where they wanted to get to, and they wanted to see if we could get them there, right? And what that's kind of resulted in now is this wider expansion. I think it's, you know, every quarter or so we're moving out to another site. So again, it's back to that point of those internal champions, helping those internal champions get the right story out to higher level sort of stakeholders in the business and open their mind up to what's possible. And then once there was that understanding that this was a reality, this wasn't just sci-fi or some sort of marketing sort of concept, that you could actually achieve this and do it. That's when we start to see the sort of pull come through. And Jonathan, you're probably working closer with them more on a day-to-day basis. You might have some sort of feeling about, you know, the way that they're actually exploiting it and working on it.
I think once we got over that proof point, that we had that first case, which was this is what's happening, these are your possible explanations, these are your recommended actions. Once they were able to prove that, they are using it, the recommendations which are coming from the Copilot now, not as gospel, but almost as. You know, taking it seriously, realizing that this isn't based off of some data science experiment, But this is based off of cutting edge technology and cutting edge predictive maintenance practices. So the recommendations that are coming through, yes, still require investigation, but it is very much honing their focus into the 2 or 3 things that they should investigate, not 10, 20 things or 20 possibilities that they now need to confirm which one.
So, I mean, it brings it back to, you got first, and then bring it back to knowledge, the knowledge point is that you first got to trust what the system's telling you. Before then, you'd obviously want to share knowledge. If you wouldn't share something if you're a bit, I'm not sure if that's saying the right things. That's the key part of it, of course, isn't it?
But I would say sharing knowledge is actually a crucial point, whether or not you trust it, because your feedback is going into the messaging. It's going into the understanding of what's happening. So even if your starting point is generic, it's basic messaging and notifications, the more you input into it, the better it's going to become. So I hope people don't see that as a point of, I don't quite trust it yet, so I'm not going to use it at all. I hope they realise that the more I use it, the better it's going to become.
Yeah, exactly. It's learning as you go, isn't it? Yeah.
And it's an assistant as well, and I think a real key part in what's been happening a lot behind the scenes as well is making sure that when we put this out, it's productionised, it's robust, and there's various sort of guardrails around it so that, you have to get it to recognise, the context that it's working in. These models are fundamentally, they've got no awareness, right? But if you can make sure that when it's being interacted with, it knows that it's talking in an industrial environment within a maintenance scenario, and there's certain sort of caveats that will come through in some of those responses from it, just to say, you should double check this, make sure you follow safety procedures, etc. So that's all a really fundamental part in the way that we've implemented this in the scope of the maintenance environment.
And I guess just to touch more on the BlueScope side, so what we're saying as well is that the leadership was very, very important in terms of driving the overall strategy and the continued sort of deployment of sensor and the sharing of knowledge between those sites.
Yeah, exactly. And I think what's key as well is it's back to that cloud question or point, that the fact that they've all got access to that same information. So now you've got colleagues in their sort of head office within BlueScope that are able to see even simple things like the scope of the deployment. How quickly are you onboarding assets? But how are you interacting with the system? What sort of successes are being achieved? We're capturing other pieces of knowledge like the key performance indicators, like how many hours of downtime did you save? How much did you save on spare parts, etc. And some of those benefits. So that knowledge then from that perspective can be aggregated up, and you can look across the entire landscape of the install base.
Also for new facilities that they may want to build in the future, if we have learning on, let's call it motor number 1, with co-pilot feedback and maintenance event information, case closure feedback, and we've learned from motor number 1, the next time they build and install motor number 1 in future facilities with a group configuration setting, click, now suddenly their new co-pilot has learned from everything that's happened in the past. So yes, it's about learning from what you have now, but also storing that knowledge for future development.
Absolutely. I want to move on just to a final question. And usually, on the podcast, we quite often, like to summarise, just to get people thinking about how to take that next step towards. So maybe Rob, if you start with, in terms of customers looking to deploy scalable predictive maintenance, enable this knowledge sharing we've been really talking about today, what would be your sort of recommendations or starting recommendations?
Understand sort of what your kind of objective is and what the vision is of what you want to achieve, but then work in a way that you can start on an incremental process towards that. And if you've got that longer term sort of vision about how you want to lay this out across your various factories and various maintenance teams, is it downtime you're trying to resolve? Is it in more enhanced sort of maintenance practices? And once you understand where you want to get to, then each of those decisions that you're making along the way, when you're doing initial deployments in one production line and then moving out to other areas, the type of training you apply, those decisions become much easier because you understand what the end goal is, and you can actually develop your own sort of roadmap and avoid a lot of pivoting along the way, right? While you learn, right? So, yeah, grasping on that longer term vision is key.
Yeah, and Jonathan.
Well, to complement that, it would be to start with value, or at least have visibility of what the value is. So what is the value long term, and then what is the value that I want to see 6 months, 12 months, 24 months, and so on. Because your long term value may be this grand idea, fantastic, have those big visions, but what you want to achieve within the first 12 months needs to be realistic, and it needs to be based on value again. So be realistic about what it is, and have value the driving factor, so that you can get those milestones and roadmap elements in place and track throughout, so you can realize your big picture.
Yeah, because I guess it's good to recognise success along the way. There's many successful steps on the way as you continuously deploy and scale. And
recognise points to learn. Because not everything goes perfectly, unfortunately.
No, we can't say that. No, exactly. No, we're realistic as well. But, as we've seen, I will plug, I've done it in a few podcasts recently, but the Blue Scope podcast we recently released is a great example of both, what we described today, but also when we mentioned the co-pilot as well, how that actually really helped them achieve, very specific success on an asset as well. So one, highly recommended. But for today, I'd like to thank Jonathan and Rob for your time and your thoughts on this really cool topic. And thank you to everyone for tuning in, and see you on the next episode.